Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're going to college football week 2 action. So each week I wanted to do a college football segment highlighting some of the top games, some of the top prospects you should watch, and on top of just giving my general, I'll call them thumbs up players of the week. So I'll give you 5 players that I watched this week that I was really impressed with their film and that you should check out as soon as possible in terms of these particular players. So let's start with the thumbs up players of the week. So number one, the number one thumbs up player of the week for me is Michael Gallup, wide receiver out of Colorado State. Most of you guys should be familiar with him by now, hopefully, who knows. But I was very impressed with him. Very good route runner, very good hands, very good body control. He's a guy that I think has a very good chance of becoming a day 2 wide receiver. I think he's a lock to be a day 2 wide receiver at this point, barring injury and barring any other stuff like that. I think he's shown enough in terms of speed, he's shown enough in terms of route running ability that he could end up being a very good contributor at the next level in the NFL based on his profile. So check Michael Gallup up immediately. Of course, Saquon Barkley, running back out of Penn State. This guy is grandma scouting at his finest, meaning that you could have your grandma watch a game of Saquon Barkley and they would say that he's good. Just amazing ability. He reminds me of like a cross between Edgerrin James and Marcus Allen. I mean, just in terms of his style, his ability, his shiftiness, his power, he's fast. He's just everything you want in a NFL running back. And definitely a guy that I think might end up being another top 5 back. Like, I think he has the potential to be taken in the top 5 of this draft to top 10. Because if he falls past the top 10, he's a steal. And like, there's no other way around it. He's just a really impressive running back when I saw him. Then we get some offensive line love. Quentin Nelson, offensive guard out of Notre Dame. Very impressive player. Plays with great power, great leverage. He's tough. He shows a lot of intensity. Great technician overall. And the Temple game in particular that I saw of him, he looked really impressive. He was one of the offensive guards last year I had as a first-round pick last year. Stayed in school, which I think was a good decision because most NFL coaches don't want NFL offensive linemen declaring early. But Quentin Nelson is a guy that I think you should check out immediately. Very impressed with him. Then we get to a guy I'm going to give some love from Oklahoma State, Raymond Foster. He is the safety there. He plays kind of like the Jabril Peppers role a little bit. Plays, in the slot a little bit. Plays deep a little bit. Plays some man. Comes up against the run as well. I was very impressed with his ability against Tulsa. He's explosive. He's fast. Very instinctive player. And I just think he's a very good secondary player. I would say you should definitely check him out as soon as possible because he's a guy that nobody's really talking about right now. And I think that you should get ahead of the curve with him because he was very impressive in that game in terms of instincts and just football intelligence. Then the last player, the last thumbs up player of the week is Denzel Ward, cornerback out of Ohio State. Now, I ain't going to lie. He had a lot of mistakes in that Indiana game. But a lot of the mistakes are really on the coaching staff. They have Denzel Ward playing shuffle bell. Shuffle bell technique, to me, is a technique that you teach to a corner that ain't got no hips. Denzel Ward has hips. He doesn't need to do shuffle bell. He just teach him real NFL technique. So, Denzel Ward is a guy that just in terms of his hips, in terms of his athleticism, very impressive player. Very instinctive player, very aggressive player. He had 4 pass deflections in that game, including interception. But he's by far my favorite secondary player of Ohio State when I watched them on film. I love Denzel Ward in terms of his potential. I don't think that he's going to end up being a top 10 cornerback. He may become a top 10 cornerback. I think the only thing that really limits his overall upside is that he doesn't quite have elite length. But I do think that as an athlete, he's going to test amazing. And I think he could have a very similar sort of career to like a Ronald Darby, for example. So like that would be sort of the ultimate sort of upside for him is like a Ronald Darby. Because I do think he's a very good, instinctive cover corner. But I just think, again, they just need to get rid of that Shuffle Bell, man. I hate Shuffle Bell. I think the only people that should be doing Shuffle Bell are cornerbacks who ain't got no hips. But he does have hips. Stop doing the Shuffle Bell. He doesn't need to compensate for his athleticism because he's got it. And now let's get to the games this week. So the 5 games this week that you should watch no matter what. Like, maybe not no matter what, but if you don't have a chance to, like, you're a busy guy, you don't have a chance to watch every single game, these are the games and these are the prospects. So number 5, I have Louisville versus North Carolina. On Louisville's side, of course, you have Lamar Jackson. People are raving about his Purdue performance. Purdue didn't play very good. I mean, Purdue sat back in soft zone, and Lamar Jackson just killed him to death in soft zone defense. So I'm not saying that it was a bad performance. I'm just saying that Purdue made it very easy for him to put up really great stats because of how much zone they were playing. Then, of course, James Hearns. He's a pass rusher at Louisville as well. I think you should check him out. He's fairly decent as well. And, of course, Jari Alexander. I'm not quite sure what happened to him in the Purdue game. He was playing in the first half, and then he was gone in the second half. But he was also another guy that was pretty impressive against Purdue as well, at least the first half. Then on the North Carolina side, I think 3 prospects that I think you should watch. MJ Stewart at cornerback. He's not quite a first-round cornerback. I know there's some people that have him as a first-round cornerback. I don't think he might sneak into the first round, but I don't really see it 100%. But he is at least a day 2 corner. He's a guy I definitely think you should check out. And I also think Bentley Spann at offensive tackle for North Carolina is another guy I think you should check out. He's a fairly athletic guy, not the strongest tackle ever, but I do think that he's someone that you should check out. And Donnie Miles at safety is another guy who popped a lot that I think you should check out as well. Next game up, Georgia versus Notre Dame. Starting with the Georgia side of things, I think Nick Chubb, Sonny Michael, those 2 running backs are guys that are must-watch in any season. They were both fantastic backs last year. They're still fantastic backs this year. And Nick Chubb especially is in the conversation to be amongst the top 5, some of the best running backs in this class. On the defensive side of the ball, Trent Thompson is a defensive tackle that I think has a chance to be a top 5 defensive tackle in this class if he continues to develop. Javon Weems at wide receiver is a senior this year who has really, he really flashed in the game last week. So I think you should probably just check him out. And, of course, Roquan Smith at linebacker is a guy that I hope breaks out this year in a big way. But he's another guy that I suggest you check out on the Georgia side of things. And then when you get to the Notre Dame side of things, it really comes down to the 2 biggie, well, actually 3 biggie ones. Quentin Nelson, of course, at offensive guard, fantastic guard overall. Aquemius St. Brown, fantastic wide receiver, has the potential to be a top 5 wide receiver in this class, amongst the top 5 of the best. Mike McGlinchey is an offensive tackle there that might end up being the top offensive tackle. I think the biggest issues I have with him is really just his ability to deal with explosiveness and just guys that are just much quicker than him. But when it comes to his hands technique and just his overall power and leverage, I think he's really good when it comes to those types of things. I just think that he has some issue dealing with speed and explosiveness off the edge. So that's the only sort of weakness with him. But overall, I think he's a very solid overall player. Josh Adams at running back is a junior wide receiver there that I think you should check out as well. And Jay Hayes at defensive end is another guy that I think you should check out in this game. Next game up, we have Auburn versus Clemson. On the Auburn side of things, I think Jarrett Stidham is a quarterback that a lot of people have been raving about. Didn't have the best game to start the year, but I think that this Clemson game will be very interesting for him to see if he can get into the conversation as a top quarterback in this class. Caron Johnson at running back is another guy that was also very impressive. And Trey Williams at linebacker. I think Trey Williams at linebacker for Auburn is another guy that you should check out in this game because I felt like he played pretty well this last week. On Clemson, Deion Kane at wide receiver. Clemson was very flat against Kent State, but I do think that Deion Kane, for the amount of snaps that he played, I felt like he stuck out. Mitch Hyatt, of course, at offensive tackle. A guy that I view more as a guard, but I do think that he also performed fairly well in terms of hands, technique, and power. Austin Bryant at defensive end is a guy that I also felt was pretty impressive. Farrell, Cleveland Farrell is another pass rusher guy that you should check out. And Christian Wilkins at defensive tackle was also fairly impressive. And Van Smith at safety was also impressive. So those are all the guys I think you should check out on Clemson so far this year. And I think this is going to be a very interesting matchup that I think you should definitely check out. Next game up, we have Stanford versus USC. On the USC side of things, Sam Darnold did not have the best game against Western Michigan, but I do think that this is a game that he could basically remind people of how good he is. So I think the last game is kind of a fluke against Western Michigan, but yeah, I think Sam Darnold is still in the conversation to be one of the top quarterbacks in this class, and I think Stanford is a good sort of measuring stick game for him to prove that. Rasheem Green at defensive tackle, I think he'll have a very good, maybe not a best day, but this will be a pretty big test game for Green against Stanford's offensive line in terms of the interior offensive line. Porter Gustin, I think, is going to have a good case to be made in this game as well against Stanford's offensive line. And Stephen Carr at running back is a guy I think you should check out as well. He's not draft eligible, but he did look pretty impressive, and I think you should check him out at USC. And, of course, Ronald Jones as well is the other running back who also kind of showed some stuff as well. So those are all the guys at USC. When it comes to Stanford, the big baddies there, Harrison Phillips at defensive tackle. I think this is this game against USC. I think is going to be a good showcase for him to kind of show what he's got. The interior offensive line is also a big thing that I really liked about Stanford against Rice. Jesse Burkett and Jason Fanaka. Those were two guys that were impressive in that game, and I think against Rasheem Green, this is going to be a good test for them. David Bright at offensive tackle. I see David Bright more as a guard, but I do think that David Bright versus Porter Gustin will be a good matchup overall. But yeah, I think Bright is more so a guard, but I do think this will still be a good matchup to kind of showcase his lateral agility and all that other kind of stuff. Peter Kalambayi is sort of an edge guy for them. He flashed a little bit against Rice. He's a pretty smart and sound football player. There's nothing amazing about him, but he is very technically sound, and I think he might get some looks and stuff once the actual draft and stuff gets here. And of course, Bryce Love at running back, I think, is another guy you should check out, who is not as fast as Christian McCaffrey, but he is very quick, very elusive, type of running back. And then the last game, the number one game that you should watch this week, if you don't have a chance to watch any games this week in college football except for one, you need to watch Oklahoma versus Ohio State. Starting on the Oklahoma side of things, Baker Mayfield. Big game for Baker Mayfield. This Ohio State secondary, it was not the most impressive against Indiana, but they do have a lot of talent. They have a lot of speed. They have a lot of disruptors. Their linebackers can run. Everything in that defense can run. So all the strengths that Oklahoma has in terms of their ability to just kind of outrun people will be kind of negated in this game. So Baker Mayfield, this is going to be a pretty big test for him to kind of prove his ability. He had a very impressive game, of course, against UTEP. It's UTEP, guys. So I'm not going to praise him too much, but he did look impressive in that game, and this is going to be a big test for him. So I think Mayfield has a chance to put his name on the map if he has a good game against Ohio State. I think it'll be a pretty tough matchup, but I think he could do it. Mark Andrews at tight end is a tight end that a lot of people have been really excited about. Had a big game against UTEP. Could have a big game against Ohio State as well because of his size matchup against those linebackers, because the linebackers of Ohio State are fast, but they don't quite have the length and the height to kind of combat bigger dudes. And I think Mark Andrews is one of the bigger dudes, and I think that's kind of where that issue is going to show up. Jeff Badgett at wide receiver is a guy who had a big game as well. Former Kentucky wide receiver, has potential to show out in this game as well against these Ohio State secondary players, but I think he's a guy who could make some noise. Of course, they have a double O pass rusher, Okoronkwo, probably saying that wrong, but he is a pass rusher for them who's fairly decent. I don't really see him as a day one or day two pick, but I do think he's a good sort of rotational guy at the next level. And finally, on the offensive line, they have Orlando Brown, who will be tested in this game because of all the pass rushers that Ohio State has, but I think this is going to be a very good measuring stick game for him to kind of show what he has in this game. And then we get to the Ohio State side of things. Players that you should watch at Ohio State, everybody, and I'm being honest. Denzel Ward, I think, is a fantastic cornerback you should check out. Taquan Lewis is a fantastic defensive end you should check out. Jerome Baker is a fairly decent coverage linebacker that you think you should check out. Chris Worley is a fantastic linebacker I think you should check out. Dante Booker is fantastic as well. Sam Hubbard is pretty dang decent. And, of course, Paris Campbell. The one thing I could say about Paris Campbell, he didn't impress me much as he was inconsistent, to say the least. His hands were kind of the bigger thing. He had a couple big drops against Indiana, but he is a fast player. He's really deadly when it comes to those crossing routes and those other sort of routes where he's able to keep his balance. Because that was a big thing, is that Indiana's linebacker did a pretty decent job against Paris Campbell, to give him a good punch going over on a crosser. But he just was able to keep his balance, keep his feet, catch the football, and then make a big run down the sideline. So Campbell is definitely a guy to keep watching, but I think in terms of his receiving ability, that's the biggest thing I think he needs to improve upon. Did show some natural ability as a route runner, though, which was very impressive. Very similar to Curtis Samuel, to be honest. He's not as fast as Curtis Samuel, but I think he's pretty much going to be used the same way and do some of the same sort of things with him. But I felt like he was pretty decent. He just needs to get better in terms of receiving ability. Billy Price also had a fairly decent day. Nick Bosa also is another guy to watch. But basically, everybody on Ohio State's defense you should check out immediately. Though that would be the biggie for me. And, of course, that matchup, Oklahoma's offense versus Ohio State's defense, is really going to be the main thing to watch in this game. But I think that's going to be where the big matchups are. That's where the money's going to be made. And I think that's the biggest aspect of this game that you need to watch. So this concludes College Football Week 2 analysis. Again, my name is James Coburn. You can find my work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.